I'm going to start today by showing you some constraints. When you create a sketch, and I'm just going to create a very simple sketch right now. This is not the actual assignment. I'm just creating a sketch to show you a few things. When you create a sketch, you'll notice that there are some lines when I create a rectangle that define something about it. This is actually a constraint, and if you select it, you can actually click on it. In the bottom right corner, it tells you what kind of constraint it is. It is a horizontal constraint or vertical constraint. That means that these are locked to those parameters, which means no matter how you move it, it has to stay horizontal or vertical. Now, other constraints that you can add are a lot of different ones. There's all sorts of constraints that are very useful. What we could do is we could, like if you look at these points, the two lines actually are coincident with each other. They are actually constrained so that this edge is touching this edge and it has a single point. That is called a coincident constraint. If I select this coincident constraint and delete it, I can then move this point away from the other point because they're no longer constrained. You might have noticed that happening sometime when your designs. Well, it's because they're not constrained. What you can do is turn that on again. So you select coincident, click here, and then click here. Now they're coincident again. Then they're constrained together. If I click it, you can see that. So that's the coincident constraint, and that's the horizontal and vertical constraint. There's a few other constraints we can talk about. One is the midpoint constraint. So if you look here, that triangle, so this X means coincident, so it's on this line. It must be somewhere on the line. That's coincident. So if I just put something here, and I put something here, and I now select this point, it's coincident with this line. It can't, the line and the point are constrained together. Also, if you look here, this is at a 90-degree constraint. It must be at 90 degrees. I can't change the angle. Now if I select this and press delete, it's still coincident, but now it's no longer at the 90-degree constraint, so I can move it back and forth. Okay? So constraints are so useful in Fusion 360. They allows you to really design things in a new way, to really build rules into what you make. Another constraint is the midpoint constraint, like I said. So it's that triangle. So I go here and the triangle appears. It's coincident with this line, but it's also, there's a triangle there. So now if I go over here, triangle here, it's in the midpoint. So I can't actually physically move that line anymore. If I grab it, I'm moving the entire object, except for this line, which is not constrained. Now what I could do is I could constrain it to the midpoint. So I could select this line, do midpoint, and select that. Oh, it doesn't like it. It has to be the point. So I have to select the point here, do midpoint of this. And now this line is on a midpoint, so I cannot physically move it, although I can make it bigger and smaller, right? So if I grab this, it causes all, now it's like partially constrained, partially not, because this bottom line is not midpoint. So what I do is I select this, so I have to go midpoint of this and this as well. So now they're all locked together. And now if I move this, it's all constrained together. There's still one thing I can change, which is the actual rectangle itself. In order to constrain that, I would actually give it dimensions. So I'd take a dimension, I'd say, well, this is a set size, like 1 inch. And then I'd say this is a set size, like 1 and 1 1/2 inch. So now, no matter what, this is locked. There's nothing that I can do. This is set in constraints with itself, and I can't move it anywhere, and that's that. So it's basically, no matter, or I can move it. What I mean is I can't adjust it. There's no tweaking this. It's just one big piece that's locked together. By the end of your design, it should follow the same rules. You shouldn't be able to grab something and move it. It should just all move together because it's all constrained and locked in place. That's how you know something's well made, is that you can just grab it all and change. And if you need to make a change, then you have to go to your dimensions or you have to go to your constraints and change it there, rather than just wobbling it around with your mouse. So that is the example that I wanted to show you before we start making the gasket, because the gasket needs some of these things. Okay, in order to design it properly, I used a lot of constraints to really get it to look good, and it also sped up my design process.